Hello again, witches, seekers, and friends, and welcome to the Fat Feminist Witch podcast, the show where we do a little ranting, raving, and wand waving. I'm your host, Paige Vanderbeck, and together we're going to explore magic and spirituality, social justice, the psychic realm, and truly modern witchcraft. Hello, my witchy friends, and thank you for tuning in to today's episode of the Fat Feminist Witch. If you're listening when this drops, that means it is Easter weekend or Ramadan for some of y'all, so I'm extra grateful that you could take the time to be here. And I hope you guys have a good, holiday weekend, whatever you guys are doing. So today's episode is a little bit different because it's actually the first episode of a new show that I've created called the Hedonic Tone, all about the goddess Voluptas, hedonism, and magical pleasure. This is a project that I've been thinking about for a while and working on for but a minute, as you'll hear in the episode. So some things are still being ironed out, but I am very excited to share the first episode. This is a podcast with music, which means it'll be exclusive to Spotify for now. But here I am going to share the episode without the licensed music so that everyone can hear it. And if you like it and want to jam along, you can find the link to hear the episode in all of its glory in the description. And I will be leaving in the little intros I do for the songs, just in case you want to listen on your own as the episode is playing through your own chosen medium. Break out your record player or whatever app you use to listen to music, or shit, if you have an 8-track, anything, enjoy. So I go into detail about why I started the show and what kinds of things I'll be talking about on it in the episode you're about to hear. I don't want to double up, but I do want to say thank you to everyone who has reached out every single time that I've mentioned Voluptas on the show or in the blog or just on social media. Every time I say her name, you guys start reaching out and saying, oh my God, thank you. I am hungry for more information. People send me artwork that they've made. They tell me about rituals or altars that they've designed, and they just let me know how much this goddess means to them as well. And that is such a beautiful thing for me. As someone who's always been fairly secular in my practice, it was really wild to find a deity that I got so attached to so quickly, right? And I feel rather unsure about it all the time. But knowing that this all resonates with a lot of other people makes this path feel a lot more solid under my feet and like I'm heading in the right direction. So I would love to know how you feel about this new show, about the episode you're about to hear. And if you have any questions about Voluptas, anything you would like to know that I can address in further episodes, please feel free to reach out. You can still find me on social media under my same handles, Fat Feminist Witch, almost everywhere, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and now Threads. Very excited. So let me know what you think. Okay, without further ado, here is the first episode of the Hedonic Tone. Hello, pleasure seekers, and welcome to the inaugural episode of the Hedonic Tone podcast, a project of love and devotion for the goddess of pleasure, Voluptas or Hedon. In listening to this show, you will hear my own journey to discovering and working with Voluptas in my spiritual practice, and of course the ways that you can do the same. Together we're going to explore the reasons why Voluptas is exactly the type of goddess the world needs right now, and the ways hedonism can be a worldview filled with beauty, compassion, and community, as well as pain, struggle, and healing. This is the temple of Voluptas, and I am its priestess, a devoted voluptuary. Some of you may be familiar with my voice from my other show, The Fat Feminist Witch, which I've been doing since 2015. I first talked about Voluptas on that show, and have posted little things here and there, but I've always wanted to devote a little more of my work and myself to this particular journey, and this is the best way I know how. I am bringing along my dedication to research and growth with me on this project, but I think it will have just a slightly different vibe. There will also be a greater focus on one of the ways I connect most with Voluptas, as it's the thing that brings me the most pleasure in life: music. So whether you are a fellow Fat Feminist Witch or are new to me and my work, I am so pleased to have you here with me. In the past, I've always taken a secular approach to spirituality. I felt more comfortable with the idea of working in tandem with the universe or the earth, rather than worshipping any deities. I rest somewhere in the middle between believer and skeptic. And thinking of deities as real, almost like a person or an animal even, something tangible, was always really hard for me. But I love the stories, the archetypal imagery, and of course the careful categorization that can arise from that. It's odd. I am an absolutely feral woman who loves to put things in neat little boxes and rows. Put me in a box? No thank you. But everything else in the world? Expertly color-coded. A few years ago, through total happenstance, I learned about Voluptas, the Roman goddess or personification of pleasure. My introduction to her name was on the canister for a particular strain of what we used to call medical marijuana in the dark days before legalization of cannabis. A friend got it with a prescription to help her with depression and fatigue. It's a sativa, so it made us feel uplifted and gave us a little extra energy and motivation to do very tedious things like cleaning. And when you look it up online, a lot of the reviews specifically note that it enhances one's desire to just sit and jam out to music. And this was something we definitely noticed. We listened to Rumors by Fleetwood Mac on vinyl twice back to back, and I've been a fan ever since. Before then, I was kind of indifferent to the band. They were fine. I really only had a copy of Rumors on vinyl because, I mean, who doesn't? It seems to be something that's in everyone's collection. But during that experience, the name Voluptas stuck out to me, as it sounded a lot like voluptuous. And a quick Google search confirmed that it is indeed the root of the word, from Latin. Voluptuous is a euphemism for fat that, as a fat woman, I always disliked. It felt like people were trying to fix something that wasn't broken, you know? Being fat is okay. It's beautiful. It's natural for a lot of people. It can even be a wonderful thing. I don't really need this fancy word to make it seem good. It's already good. It felt like someone was trying to cover up something that they thought was bad, that they thought everyone thought was bad. The word voluptuous doesn't actually mean fat. It's not even about bodies specifically. It's a way to say that something inspires pleasure. It is made of pleasure. So soft, curvy women's bodies were something that inspired pleasure for many. And so the word became tied to that body type. But any body can be voluptuous. Hell, anything can be voluptuous. Flowers, food, sunsets, experiences, whatever it is that brings you pleasure or inspires you to seek out pleasure. That completely shifted my feeling about the word. And it planted this teeny tiny little seed in my mind and in my heart that connected me to this goddess, to Voluptas. I learned that in Greece her name was Hedon, and that's where the word hedonism comes from. So in the show you'll hear me refer to her both ways. But Voluptas is the one I often use to describe the goddess herself, while hedonic or hedonistic are words I often use to describe practices and philosophies associated with her. My friends, here we are going to take a minute to listen to a couple of songs to get us in the mood for pleasure. First is Voluptas by Soyem, a band from France that does not seem to be making any more music, which is a shame because the album this song is from, Futuristic Symbiosis from 2016, is incredibly cool. This song is not strictly instrumental, but doesn't have any discernible words. It is pure feeling. Then we're going to listen to Fade Into You by Mazzy Star, an absolute classic from 1993 that seems to be universally adored. While there's no bad time for either song, This combination is one of my favorites while driving with the windows down. So if you're in the car, I highly recommend letting the wind blow through your hair for the next 5.5 minutes. In the mythology from both Greece and Rome, Voluptas was the daughter of Cupid, or Eros, the god of erotic love, and his wife Psyche, a mortal who, through great pain and suffering, ascended to Olympus and became the goddess of the soul. All of this also makes Voluptas the granddaughter of Venus, or Aphrodite, the goddess of love. Voluptas didn't really feature in any of her own myths, and she didn't have a physical form until much later, when she was included in famous works of art, like Primavera by Botticelli, or The Banquet of Amor and Psyche by Giulio Romani. She was more of a representation of an idea. She was the personification of pleasure, usually sensual pleasure or pleasure experienced through the body, as well as things like delight and enjoyment. She never had her own cult or religion, though in Greece's Hedon, of course, she became the inspiration for the philosophy of hedonism. But this wasn't a cult or a religion. It was more of a worldview. She was essentially a footnote in the myth of Psyche and Eros. Despite that, or maybe because of it, that little tiny hop down the Voluptas rabbit hole, I just couldn't shake it. I couldn't stop thinking about it, about her. As I read more, Voluptas as an idea, and hedonism as a non-religious value system, this seemed perfect for me. I had a hard time seeing deities as people, and preferred to see them as inspirational ideas. But it didn't take long for me to start to build Voluptas into something very real. I started to imagine what she would look like, how she would move through the world, tangible things that would be sacred to her, like flowers and crystals and colors, herbs, foods. All of those things that witches and other spiritual people use in their worship of deities. I was not satisfied with her being an idea or an energy. She felt too real to me. So real she became. I started writing about her and podcasting about her and sharing her with others. And I know that I am no longer the only one who is connected with this goddess in a very real way. She is my patron, or matron, I guess, goddess now. Every goddess doesn't feel real all of a sudden, but I think that only reinforces her importance to me. I see her and her energy everywhere. I know she is woven into everything I do, everything I want, and everything I have always been. I have slowly been building up who she is, how to work with and worship her, and how she affects the lives of those who would seek her out. This podcast is a devotional creation to my goddess. Through it, I can continue to explore her and her energy, share that with others. I can deepen my knowledge and understanding of hedonism and magical pleasure, and hopefully connect with other people who want to do the same. This is a hedonic project, and that's why it's called the Hedonic Tone. My favorite song in the world is I Put a Spell on You, originally by Screamin' Jay Hawkins. And I am of the correct opinion that there has never been a bad version recorded. The song is just that good. But of all the covers out there, Nina Simone's reigns supreme. This was released on the album of the same name in 1965, which was her most pop-oriented album, even though she was a real jazz singer. But that made it one of her most widely enjoyed. Her voice has the spooky vibe needed to convey the magic of the song, with a smoother and romantic sound that makes it incredibly sexy. Hedonic tone is a term from psychology that describes the feeling or experience of pleasure versus pain. A low hedonic tone leans more to the side of pain or even indifference. High hedonic tone is pleasure, ecstasy, euphoria. It can be used to describe a quality of a thing or an experience. Pleasure is subjective, so you may not agree, but chocolate, in my opinion, has a very high hedonic tone. Even bad chocolate is a pleasurable experience for me. The term can also be used to describe the lens through which we experience the world, our hedonic response, our outlook on life. Our life experiences in the past and in the present can cause a fluctuation in our responses to pain and pleasure, of course. Some people can also be genetically predispositioned to low hedonic response. Conditions like ADHD and schizophrenia can come complete with what some may call a negative outlook on life. This can cause people to develop major depressive disorder, all manner of anxiety disorders, and substance abuse. To put it bluntly, being miserable makes you miserable, but that's not always something that you can help. It's not entirely in your control. It is a combination of chemical responses in the brain, which is out of your hands, and the actual circumstances of your life, which is still not completely up to you. Almost my entire life, I have had people tell me that I have a negative outlook, or even that I am an inherently negative person, which I have to say is a pretty fucked up thing to tell anybody, especially since a lot of those same people would also say that I was too idealistic, or too focused on fun and not enough on responsibility. Pick a lane, friends. What really sucks about that is that they were a little bit right. I found it in my 30s that I have ADHD, pretty intense ADHD, and always have. I also experienced some trauma in my childhood, my teens, my early 20s. I have major depressive disorder and social anxiety disorder as a result. What all of this means, as far as I understand, is that it's much harder for me to feel emotions associated with pleasure without a lot of effort. I often see experiences, people, and life in a negative way. Now, there are 3 things that I can do about that. 1, I can take medication to help deal with the brain chemistry part. 2, I can train myself to intentionally look for positives in the world. And 3, I can accept that this is how my brain works, and I have to decide if I want to fight for pleasure, and then I have to keep fighting. And I've decided that all 3 of those things sound like a pretty good plan. I'm going to talk more about psychology and brain chemistry in another episode, because that's not really how I am using the term hedonic tone right now. I was inspired by this term. I'm fully appropriating the scientific term, if I'm being honest. And I'm giving it a more magical meaning. So for our purposes, the hedonic tone is a vibe, a frequency, an energy, a sound. The sound of pleasure and even pain. And through both of those things, the sound of happiness. It's a tone that is coming from the world around me, and that also comes from inside me. And when my own scales of happiness are balanced, the hedonic tone is loud and clear, and it resonates inside, outside, and all around me. Happiness is when I am dancing to the same song as the universe, and fully experiencing the high notes and the low notes, the up-tempo beats and the slow jams, the harmonies and the solos. We are going to have a little bit of fun with this next song. I think most of you will be able to sing along. You might know all the words, though you might not be familiar with this version. This is Why Don't You Do Right by Peggy Lee and Benny Goodman from 1942. This song was originally recorded in 1936 by Kansas Joe McCoy as Weed Smoker's Dream. Love that. Then covered by Lil Green in 1941. Peggy Lee used to listen to that version of the song over and over and over in her dressing room. And considering it was on record at the time, I think you understand the dedication this took. Her dressing room happened to be right next to Benny Goodman's, and he suggested that they record their own version since she couldn't stop listening to it. And that became the most recognizable version until about 1988, when Jessica Rabbit sang it in Who Framed Roger Rabbit as a very sexy, burlesque, lounge-type song in that absolutely ridiculous and physics-defying sequined red dress with the long purple gloves. Really, the singer of the song was not, Jessica Rabbit in real life. It was Amy Irving, who you might recognize as Sue Snell from Carrie. wild bit of trivia. Anyway, this has always been a very sexy and a very bluesy song, and it's one I just can't help to sing along to whenever I hear it. So I encourage you to do your best Jessica Rabbit as you listen along. My greatest and truest love, the thing that has given me the most pleasure every day of my life, is music. I love almost all music from all time periods, using almost any instrument and in any language. I listen to music in languages I don't even know, and I feel something. I listen to music all day, and nothing else has ever gifted me as much inspiration, comfort, arousal, anger, companionship, and insight as music. It is the number one thing that I connect with other people over. My friends are music people. The members of my family that I actually like are music people. I love dancers, singers, musicians, audio techs, radio DJs, roadies, concert fanatics, and other people like me who just derive pleasure from everything to do with music. When it comes to the ways that you may encounter voluptas in life, your first thoughts may be through sex or food, both of which are very true. But art, music, love, and laughter are also ways to connect with her energy. Since music is the greatest source of pleasure in my life, this is the place I find her the most. That's why I plan to feature music throughout every episode of the show, and even share some of my favorite music and musicians and the relationships that they have with pleasure and hedonism. I conceived of this podcast earlier this year. Actually, a long time ago, but earlier this year is when I really started to solidify my idea. And in February, I finalized a name and I made album artwork. I wrote out a couple of episodes. I began recording the one that you're listening to now. And then I got an email saying that Spotify would be discontinuing their music and talk feature this June for podcasts. And that was absolutely necessary for the show that I had planned. Of course, that same day I took a break from writing out an episode to check my email, and there it was. So while I had planned to launch this podcast in May during Taurus season and continue it for as long as possible, I am moving up the timeline and getting out as many episodes as I can before my cutoff date. From there, I may try to continue without the music if I think the show can still work. I suppose we'll see how it goes. The Spotify for Podcasters music and talk feature allowed people to put out episodes exclusive to that platform that included real licensed music. So it would feel more like listening to a classic radio show with music breaks. And I think the move to axe this feature is quite devastating. A lot of shows out there were built around this function, and they will have to completely end because of it, which leaves a lot of creators with no show, and therefore no source of income. This is a rant, and I'm sorry, but I'm very, very upset about it. So the Hedonic Tone will be exclusive to Spotify. If you've never been a Spotify user, that is totally fine. I understand. I would like to release the episodes without the licensed music so that they can be heard on any platform, and I will give you updates when that is possible. I will also include the names and the order of the songs played in the show description so that you can open up your favorite app or set yourself in front of your record player and vibe. In fact, as a fan of records, I will be extra impressed if you literally pull out vinyl records just to play the music that I have curated for these episodes. That is devotion, and I know Voluptas would appreciate it. In this music break, you'll hear 2 tracks from 1967, and I can almost guarantee the first will be completely unrecognizable to you. Taurus, the Voluptuary, is from a psychedelic album that only could have been made in the 60s, called The Zodiac, Cosmic Sounds. It's a big compilation of artists with a sort of poem spoken by Cyrus Faryar, who also played guitar and ukulele on Cass Elliott's Dream a Little Dream, one of my favorites. He spoke it over psychedelic music. Taurus is the zodiac sign most associated with the enjoyment of sensual pleasure, as well as being a fairly solid earth sign. And these themes are certainly explored in the song. Then we have Time of the Season by the Zombies, the ultimate ode to the free love movement of the 1960s, and ask the listener to consider what's really important in life, namely pleasure or prosperity. It also has a little tongue-in-cheek reference to Summertime by George Gershwin, and you will certainly hear Janis Joplin's cover of that song at some point on this show. So let's take a psychedelic journey into pleasure 1960s style. All of the songs in this inaugural episode are from a devotional playlist that I made years ago that I use in my practice and my worship of Voluptas, and I will link to the whole list, but I would like it if you would try and make your own. What songs or artists represent pleasure to you? They could simply be your favorites. Their subject matter could be about experiences you associate with pleasure, or they could have words like voluptas or hedonism or pleasure right in the name or the lyrics. It's up to you. My personal taste in music covers a wide range of genres and time periods, but a few things that you can expect here is that they will be older, like more than 20 years older generally, and some more like 100 years older. It's a pretty long time period. They will also often be in the rock or soul associated genres. My favorite decades for music are the 70s and the 90s. And some of my favorite singers and groups are Screamin' Jay Hawkins, who wrote I Put a Spell on You, Janis Joplin, Jeff Buckley, Nina Simone, Al Green, The Doors, Amy Winehouse, Nirvana, Robert Johnson, Florence and the Machine, and Hozier. Some of these artists definitely fit the bill when it comes to finding music that I think speaks to or would please the goddess of pleasure, but it's less about the artist or the decade or the genre than it is the overall vibe of the song. And what about it is pleasing? A lot of the songs have a sexual or overtly romantic vibe, often surrounding a seductive femme fatale type character, a woman who exudes sexuality without shame. Songs like Venus in Furs by the Velvet Underground, or Something He Can Feel by Aretha Franklin. I like songs expressing intense feelings of longing and desire, we'll name any song by Jeff Buckley, but Lover You Should Have Come Over is a great example. When you combine that vibe with something magical or spiritual, like the song Hallelujah, or Nina Simone's cover of I Put a Spell on You, that is pure voluptas. Songs that use the imagery of some of the foods I associate with hedonism, like honey, chocolate, coffee, and wine, also feature heavily on my list. Many of a slower tempo. More than half the songs of the list have fewer than 100 beats per minute, meaning that they are more likely to match the rhythm of a heart at rest versus one that is stressed out. Something else I noticed is that a lot of the songs are in the keys of D, G, and F, which correspond to the throat, heart, and sacral chakras. Interesting. So you have lots of songs that resonate with energies like authenticity, love, and of course pleasure. Our final song of the episode is Give Me Your Love by Curtis Mayfield from the Superfly soundtrack from 1972, which is, without question, one of the best albums of all time, which is wild for it being a movie soundtrack. This song is featured in a really sexy and romantic bathtub scene, which is in stark contrast to the adrenaline-packed, heavy subject matter of the rest of the film. I could talk about Superfly and this genre of movie all day, but for now, just let yourself sink into Curtis Mayfield's warm and sensual sound. I've chosen 6 tracks for this episode that I think will help get you into the right frame of mind to connect to Voluptas without doing more than simply listening with an open heart and allowing yourself to feel pleasure. Throughout future episodes, I will share more and more about this goddess, about the things sacred to her, her mythology, about ways to invite her into your life, and about hedonism as a worldview. And I'm hoping that will provide a pathway for you to experience and resonate with the hedonic tone. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in and listening to this new project today. Is it weird that I feel like extra nervous? I've been putting out podcast episodes for years, and for some reason, the fact that this just has a slightly, it just has a different name is making me feel a little self-conscious. But I'm excited to share it, and I really hope you liked it. You can totally share any feedback that you have on my website, thefatfeministwitch.ca. You'll see the post about this episode right at the top of the blog, and you can leave comments there, or through the Q&A feature on Spotify if you use that app. Again, if you want to listen to the whole episode with the music on it, you can follow or subscribe to the actual show, and you can find the link to do that in the description of this episode here. If you want to reach out, you can find me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and now Threads by searching Fat Feminist Witch. Now, if you'd like to support the show and get little extras like early episode releases, detailed show notes, and monthly posts about astrology and magic, you can visit patreon.com/thefatfeministwitch. I truly could not do any of this without the support of these patrons, and I am so grateful for their help and their love and their good vibes every single day. If you want to get some Fat Feminist Witch merchandise, you can do that on my TeePublic shop, which is linked in the description. You can find tote bags, stickers, magnets, hoodies, and t-shirts up to size 5X in a wide range of colors. And I can tell you that they are incredibly comfortable, and the tote bags, I fill mine to the brim with books. And it has not failed me yet. So definitely check that out. Have a wonderful Easter weekend, everybody, and I can't wait to talk to you again on the next episode of either the Fat Feminist Witch or the Hedonic Tone.